and welcome to the Back to Bulgaria podcast. Today I am here with Ivan Lyutskanov, who's born and raised in Varna, studied abroad in Germany, and has come back to Bulgaria. Many of you know him as the creator of the platform Zemlevesh.
The purpose of the platform is to present Bulgaria and the world around us in an accessible way.
He is also the head of online sales and marketing for Manja, a Bulgarian-based second-hand clothing company that started right here in Varna.
It's when Bulgaria moved back to it was my home city. It was my home of Varna.
How was that experience of going to Munich?
It was quite exciting for a young man from Bulgaria to end up in Munich, to look around the big Western city. On the other hand, I also do think that it's important for someone to be civically engaged. I find it much easier to care about the society which you consider your own.
Or there is this hope that if the government's not going to do it, we're going to take it into our own hands. You're also doing your part.
I'm not succeeding, unfortunately. There are two aspects of making things better. So one can make things better for themselves. However, to change things on a grander scale, you need a consensus, a majority of people seeing things in a similar way, and unfortunately this is not the case yet. Yeah, it's baby steps, and I hope we scale up the steps now.
This is the Back to Bulgaria podcast. Discover life in Bulgaria, one story at a time.
So hello, Ivan.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here and happy to be in your home city with you. For me, I haven't been to Varna much before, actually, so it's a big pleasure to be able to come and feel the energy and the vibes of this great city. I really like it.
Well, I like to say that although it's not the biggest, it's most certainly the most beautiful Bulgarian city, so
oh, wow.
That's a fact.
Would you say it's your favorite Bulgarian city?
Yes, of course.
That's great. I love that. Before we start the rest of the podcast, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself before we get on with your story and how you came back to Bulgaria?
With great pleasure. So, where do we start? I was born 28 years ago here in Varna, as you already mentioned. I went to kindergarten, school, high school here. Mm-hmm. I had various interests growing up. I participated in some school competitions, especially linguistics, which was one of my favorite areas of study while I was at high school.
Wow, that's really...
Yeah, and afterwards I went on to study abroad in Germany, in Munich. I did my bachelor's degree in business economics there. At a certain point of time, I graduated, and I didn't have any better plans what to do with my life, so I stayed there. I accepted a job offer. I stayed for work. In fact, I worked for approximately 5 years in Munich before I moved back to Varna, which happened roughly 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been living happily here in my home city.
Yeah.
Close to friends, family, the sea breeze you mentioned too.
Yes. Can we backtrack a little bit before you moved abroad? How was your life here, and what led you to actually think about studying abroad?
My life here was amazing, to be honest. So I was lucky enough to go to excellent schools in this city. So my primary school, nicknamed the Russian school, because we had some Russian language education there, was quite unique in the way that it had a strong focus on foreign languages. We already had 3 of them in the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. I was, brought together with quite a few very smart, very bright kids.
Yeah. That's really important, actually.
Yeah, indeed.
Something that you don't see in many different countries. At least in the States, by the 5th grade, I was still learning English. I did not have other languages introduced to me. But
we did learn English there too. Anyway, so there is this saying in Bulgaria, usually your mother tells you this, that you become the person like the ones with whom you gather on a daily basis. So there I met some great friends.
Yeah.
This was definitely a strong influence on my later development. And, later I went on to high school, the so-called first language high school, where I studied German very intensively. Mm-hmm. Honestly, in the 8th grade, we had 20 hours of German each week.
Wow. Okay.
It was terrible. Pure torture.
For the language learning or for the school part?
Language learning. And because of 2 separate reasons. First of all, it it gets kind of boring to study German for 20 hours per week.
Yeah.
And separately, it leaves little room for other interests, other engagements, etc. So obviously, if you focus on German, you have less time for maths, history, etc. So nevertheless, it was a very good school. Also, I was lucky enough to sit in the same room as incredibly smart, intelligent individuals. We influenced each other a lot. And this is where I got very interested in fields such as linguistics, which I mentioned, which isn't a subject in school per se, but it's a very famous field for school competitions in Bulgaria. I also got really interested in physics, for instance. For a while, I was planning a career in nuclear physics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I liked it. However, then I decided that I would probably be unemployed if I go down this path and live in Bulgaria. I think it was clear to me and probably to my parents that I'm going to study abroad at this point. Partly, higher education in Bulgaria has some deficits. Moreover, I was fluent in some foreign languages, so I had the option to study abroad. Obviously, I wanted to experience how life abroad is. And I guess it wasn't a real decision at a certain point in time to study somewhere else.
Okay,
I just assumed it will happen. I didn't know where. Eventually, I ended up in Munich. But it was kind of clear in my last years in high school.
Yeah, and I know that you had actually done an exchange while you were in high school, so you already had a kind of like international educational experience.
I did spend a couple of weeks in Germany while I was in the 9th grade. It was interesting. It was eye-opening because I saw firsthand how life is abroad. I stayed with a local family. I liked some things and disliked others.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a very useful, very helpful experience for someone, for a Bulgarian teenager as I was.
Yeah, I think that it's important, especially in like the years that you're growing up around classmates, peers, and to be able to like go abroad and to be able to experience even just a little bit life abroad really gives you a bigger perspective on.
Moreover, I'm a big fan of comparison. I like comparing people, countries, myself to others. And that's why I stressed I was so lucky to meet and be together with such smart, active, engaged individuals while growing up. When you compare yourself to someone who is, well, smart, active, engaged, ambitious, you tend to become the same person, you tend to develop the same traits. And this was a very strong motivator for me to develop, to learn new things, to try new things, and to expect, want, and achieve more in life. Yeah,
this is something actually that I have been thinking about in myself, like how it's good to surround yourself with people that encourage you, but also that like you can kind of encourage each other to continue to be ambitious, to continue to explore outside the box, to continue to look for the next thing to do, kind of, because that way you're motivating each other.
There is this saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe in this. That's why I found this culture of school competitions in Bulgaria to be especially nurturing. Having some experience in Germany, I've come to learn that such competitions, national competitions, are fairly uncommon there. At least not in any academic fields, at least not for high school students. Here, they're quite a big thing, and obviously they help you meet people who have been selected from all over the country, people that end up in the same room under circumstances that would otherwise be impossible. That's how you can constantly raise the bar and meet people who are smarter and smarter, and end up in rooms where it's getting increasingly harder to be the smartest person. Yeah,
that's always something to take as an opportunity for yourself, to be around people that are smarter than you, to keep aiming for a higher.
Indeed, it's not a threat. It's a blessing.
Yeah, very important, I'd say, to keep doing even when you grow up, even when you're
compete, compare.
Yeah, not in a bad way, in a good way.
Of course.
Yeah. So After graduating high school, I assume you went on to study in Munich. How was that experience of going abroad, of going to Munich for you? Was there any culture shock? Like, how did it all happen for you?
It felt, let's say, ambivalent. So obviously, it was quite exciting for a young man from Bulgaria to end up in Munich, to look around a big Western city, to meet new people, get to learn more about the local culture.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it was also difficult. So there are many differences between education systems that I found challenging. For instance, while you're at school, and generally in Bulgaria, you have a personal approach from your teachers that want to motivate you, to control you, to push you to study hard, do your homework, etc. In Germany, at least at university, it's pretty different. So nobody from the professors is interested in what you do. You go to lectures if you want to. You study if you want to. At the end of the semester or at the end of the year, you have one very hard, very big exam. If you fail, well, you're kicked out of university. So there is that, and this was quite a new experience. Also, you have to learn how to live by yourself. Yeah. Obviously, while I was at high school, I lived with my parents, who are also in Varna, by the way, and I didn't have to take care of many, households, chores.
Yeah.
Exactly. And instantly suddenly when you have to do your own shopping, do your own laundry, keep your room clean, etc., it might be quite challenging for someone who's not used to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Even like
I learned by my own mistakes.
Yeah.
And eventually I got used to it.
Especially when you go abroad. You're on another level of learning to be independent and to be able to take care of yourself and then be able to create the environment that you want around you.
I completely agree. It makes you independent in a very unique way. However, it also it creates the risk to make many mistakes.
Yeah.
I think they both go hand in hand, and you can learn from these mistakes. Sometimes you learn slower than you you'd wish. However, I'd say it was an eye-opening experience. Not only studying there or living there by yourself, but also, working there, earning your own money, paying your own taxes, financing your own life after a certain point in time. So I'm fairly grateful for these things, which I probably wouldn't have learned at the same pace if I had stayed in Varna.
Yeah. And you not only went to study abroad in Germany, but then you went to study abroad again within your study abroad, right? You did an exchange.
Yes, I did an exchange in Prague.
Yeah. How was that?
Well, there is this Erasmus program in Europe, so students can participate in an exchange program in a different country. Some countries are even outside of Europe. When I was choosing the place where I will do my exchange semester, I wanted it to be a place where I can learn the local language during this exchange period.
Oh, cool.
So obviously Chinese, for instance, was out of the question. I can't learn Chinese in half a year. However, I do speak Bulgarian and Russian, which are both Slavic languages, and I thought I must have good chances to learn another Slavic language in a couple of months. Yeah. Obviously not at an expert level, but at least to be able to have conversations, to read basic texts, etc. That's why I chose the Czech Republic. Yeah. I was in Prague once before, and I really liked the city. It's beautiful. I recommend it to everyone I know.
Yes.
And that's how I chose Prague. It was amazing. It was great. Perhaps the perfect place to have your exchange. I did learn some Czech, and it was also interesting to see that life in an otherwise former socialist country was really decent. Life in Prague is nice. I compared, not only in my personal subjective experience, I did check average salaries, rent, the cost of groceries, etc.
Cost of living overall.
Yeah, cost of living overall. And it turned out, I made some local friends, we talked, we exchanged our views, and it turned out a decent life in Prague was possible, and many people were living it.
Yeah.
Up until this point, as a Bulgarian coming from another former socialist country, I didn't really believe this was possible. I thought that, well, socialism had broken our countries, our mindsets,
Yeah.
to the extent that a good life wasn't possible anymore in these places. It turned out I was wrong, and this was eye-opening indeed.
Yeah, I'm sure, like, especially going abroad and then abroad again into a country that has a similar past kind of as Bulgaria and being communist before and then transitioning out of that, maybe it showed that it's a possibility in general and possibly
Indeed. So
for Bulgaria
obviously
as
their
well.
transition. So we do partly share the same history. Then I learned there are quite a few differences as well, but obviously their transition from socialism to a capitalist democracy was much more successful than was Bulgaria's. However, it showed that a poor transition, it's not destiny, it's not a necessity.
Yeah.
It's something that happened here, but didn't happen elsewhere.
Yeah.
And this gave me the belief and the conviction that a brighter future is possible everywhere.
Yeah.
Nothing is set in stone, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess this mindset it's like a mindset shift that I think is very valuable, just like in looking at stuff in the future in general.
Correct?
In Bulgaria right now, I meet, of course, all types of people, but there is, like, I guess, some general mindset that this is how things are and this is how it's going to be. Whereas then there's, I guess, a younger generation maybe that is, growing up and they're like, well, actually, there's a whole bunch of other things happening in the world and they're happening in Bulgaria as well. We just got to grab them and take the opportunities that could, like, make things different.
I think so too.
Going back to your story, what did you study in university, and how did that maybe lead into your career later in Germany?
Well, I studied business economics. It's known as a field that people choose when they have no idea what they want to choose. In fact, I chose it deliberately. I was interested in it, and I also thought it's universal enough to offer you good career chances afterwards. Overall, I was satisfied with the quality of my degree there. The university in Munich is one of the best universities in Germany and in the EU in general. However, I was dissatisfied with my choice of a field. So obviously I chose it because I thought it's universal enough, because I will be able to find any career I want to.
Yeah.
And I thought that this would be harder with different fields. For instance, if I would study history or physics or something else that I was really passionate about. Growing up, having some experience in the corporate world, I learned that this isn't the case. You have, in the corporate world, people with various degrees at very high positions, very successful ones, that gave me the opposite example. You could have studied history or physics and work in a pure business environment.
Yeah.
On the other hand, even in Bulgaria, you have different fields that offer you very good career chances. You have the stereotypical programming, computer science, that seems, or at least seemed to be the hot job in Bulgaria, at least until recently.
Yeah.
We have different fields of engineering, medicine, etc., that are, that offer you good chances here and all around the world, I guess.
Yeah.
So if I would choose again, I probably would go for something different. This doesn't mean that I didn't learn enough or that I found what I learned useless. It is quite useful in my everyday life to understand the world around me.
Yeah.
I think that economics in general is something very valuable for everyone to assess their situation or the situation in society overall correctly. And it's generally an interesting subject to get acquainted with.
I think that whatever we study in university can be useful, of course, in our everyday life.
The diploma proves that you were able to learn in short time frames an excessive amount of knowledge, of facts, of concepts.
We have this discipline, this ability, this diploma.
Yeah, and obviously you can learn in different ways. For example, I wasn't very disciplined I strived for efficiency, and well, I achieved it. I was able to learn this huge amount of stuff in rather short time frames, the closer I came to the exam date.
Yeah.
Obviously, other learns with more consistency. People learn in different ways. However you learn, your diploma proves that you have this ability.
Yeah.
And this is, I came to learn that this is the most important aspect of any job, to develop, to be able to learn new things on the job. And good employees are the ones that can develop their skills quickly.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much something you learn at university. It doesn't matter in which field.
Yeah, that's true. And so then when you graduated, what was next for you? How did you take on the next step?
I was doing a really serious internship in management consulting during my last semester at university. Then eventually came the email or the letter that I apparently had graduated. I was, not that I was surprised, but I didn't have any concrete plans what to do afterwards.
Yeah.
And I decided to stay in the same field. I specialized in market research, which basically means a lot of Googling, a lot of research on various industries, companies, trends, making some forecasts, data analysis, etc.
Yeah.
So I stayed in the same field in a different company. It was specialized in the telecom, media, and tech industries. So I learned a lot about them.
Yeah.
Eventually, I noticed that my learning curve wasn't the same as it was in the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah.
So I was learning less and less in a unit of time.
Yeah.
That was right around the time when COVID started.
Okay.
So I had to stay and work at home for a while. I figured that my job had become somewhat boring, and I changed it. So I applied for another position at Amazon, an amazing, very big company. There I worked as, how should you describe it? Something like a project manager.
Okay.
In a new digital logistics unit that was being built up in Europe. I was among the first to start there. So you can say obviously the team and I, as a part of it, started this business in Europe.
No, that's really unique. I'm sure you learned a lot from like that.
I did learn a lot, yes.
Amazon, a big US company going into Europe. I'm sure that transition, and I'm sure that being part of that team was really
we did. So it was a very international team. We did share lots of know-how between teams within the company. And I also had the chance to work with some of the brightest young professionals that I could possibly meet. Great people, great teachers in a way as well, because we got to share a lot of expertise between each other. And that's where I stayed for 2.5 years, if I recall correctly. We worked on some very interesting projects. We learned a lot in the process about the logistics industry in Europe in general, also about certain aspects of life in such a big company, and also about external stakeholders that were our partners, clients, consultants, etc.
Yeah, I'm sure like with Amazon's like huge network of people all over the world, I'm sure there was a lot of opportunities to learn from
and
all
I must say,
spheres.
so obviously I don't work there anymore, so I don't have any interest in sugarcoating anything that happens there. I was very positively surprised by the company culture in many ways, also by the way it treats employees. I had the chance to have first-hand experience at different levels in the company, both at a lowly warehouse where you just drag boxes from A to B, and at a higher level where important strategic decisions were discussed. At each level, I did have this positive surprise, contrary to what, the outside world might make you believe about Amazon. It was a great place to work at.
You were in this environment of, I guess, very well-structured corporate kind of job and world. It sounds like stuff was going well. You had a good job in Germany. But I know that this next step was Bulgaria. So how did that start as an idea in your mind to move back to Bulgaria after having that experience abroad?
It was always a kind of a fixed plan, or at least a fixed dream, let's say, to return and live in my home city of Varna. So usually when I say that I returned, I don't say I returned to Bulgaria or that I moved back to Bulgaria. It's not Bulgaria I moved back to. It was my home city. It was my home of Varna. I make a clear distinction between the two because I have many friends who have lived abroad and who have moved to Sofia, although they grew up in different cities.
Yeah.
And I think these are two different aspects of such a return. Obviously, Sofia is a much bigger labor market. You have much bigger companies, offices, higher salaries, more opportunities there. And Varna, unfortunately, has much less of all of these. Nevertheless, I always wanted to live here. At a certain point in time, I decided that, if I don't do it now, I guess I never will. I made some attempts to find a decent job here. One of them was successful. And that's how I decided to return. So my family is still living here. My partner, we've actually married recently.
Congratulations.
So she lived here, at least for most of the time too. And this was a strong motivator to pick this particular spot. Other than that, I think it is even rational, objectively rational, to feel better at your home place, at your hometown, at your home city. If I wasn't born here, if I haven't been here before, I probably wouldn't have picked Varna as the best spot in the whole wide world where I would live.
Okay.
But being Bulgarian, being a person from Varna, this is where my home is.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel emotionally better. I think this is something psychologically normal.
Yeah.
And indeed, my life satisfaction, if you want to call it that way, has been somewhat higher here. And don't we all live for this particular purpose, to be more satisfied with life?
Like you said, satisfying thing to be able to come back after learning so much abroad in a different environment where, I don't know, at least for me, being abroad, you're kind of constantly, at least to a certain extent, I don't know, for me, I have this thing where I have to be on top of things all the time. And you need to kind of anticipate what's happening. Whereas when you're at home or when you're in some place that you feel more familiar with, it's not as, I think, mentally exhausting, I guess.
This must be, so I'm by no means an expert in this field, but this must be the psychological background of this feeling. You feel more familiar with a certain place. You connect it with old memories, old friends, old feelings from when you were a child.
Yeah.
And this familiarity translates to more satisfaction.
It's true.
People like places they know. So I guess this was one of my main reasons for choosing Varna.
Yeah.
I like to say that if people, I think it's a quote by someone more important in the past, but I like to say that if people could choose where to be born, some countries would remain empty. I hope this wouldn't be the case in Bulgaria, but perhaps it would. Nevertheless, I think it is quite usual and quite normal for Bulgarians to enjoy living here, at least on a subjective, emotional, psychological level. I think it's normal for Greeks to enjoy living in Greece, etc., or for Germans to enjoy Germany in this particular way. And I do enjoy Varna in the same way. I also do think that it's important for someone to be civically engaged, to follow some social interests and generally to care about society.
Yeah.
I find it much easier to care about the society which you consider your own.
Yeah.
I guess I was very well integrated into German society. Nevertheless, I always felt my civic engagements would be, let's say, in vain over there.
Yeah. I gotta say, for me, being somebody that's in between two cultures, in between two countries, kind of, I have the civic engagement feeling for the States, for the United States, and for Bulgaria. It's an interesting place to be in between, but yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah. You gotta worry about the politics in both places, I guess.
Whoa, what a pity.
But it's cool. How was it for you in the transition back to Bulgaria? Was there any challenges that you faced or any surprising opportunities that showed that that you were able to take advantage of?
It's definitely a difficult step into the unknown when you move to a new country where you haven't lived for years and where you haven't lived as an adult at all. I wouldn't say I'm brave. I'm rather careless in this regard. This means that I wasn't very worried about me moving here. I wasn't very anxious about it. I just thought I would do it and I will let things unfold the way they do.
Yeah.
They did in a sufficiently pleasant way. So as I mentioned, I already had a job. I already had a place to work here, which was an important factor for me. I already had my family here and I did have some old friends.
Yeah.
For my initial social bubble. I was aware of the various things that are inferior in Bulgaria than their state in Germany, let's say. Obviously, infrastructure here isn't great. You have issues with corruption, education, the healthcare system, etc. But I did believe that there are ways around all of these obstacles.
Yeah.
My biggest concern was whether I will find a social environment where I can thrive, where I have a sufficient number of good friends with whom to exchange ideas, to work on interesting projects together, to have insightful conversations. That was definitely my biggest fear. And I can tell you why. Many of my co-students from high school with whom we've been great friends 10 years ago, they don't live here anymore. So many of them have moved either abroad or to Sofia, where, as I've mentioned, you have better work opportunities. So I was afraid perhaps there aren't enough people here with whom I can enjoy my life. And having the social environment, the social bubble, if you want to call it that way, is important.
Yeah.
Luckily, I did find enough people. Obviously, I reconnected with some old friends. I made quite a few new friends as well. And now I can confidently say that I know a sufficient number of great individuals here in Varna. They're all smart, highly educated, intelligent, and very active citizens as well, with whom we coexist and we, I hope, teach each other important lessons and with whom we exchange ideas and make our own worlds a better place in a way.
Yeah. It was cool. I had an opportunity to see into your social bubble in Varna yesterday when we met up with your friends, and I was really pleasantly and happily welcomed by all of them. And also it's just cool to see in different places in Bulgaria. Everywhere I go in Bulgaria, there's these really intelligent people that are developing things, that are creating things. Sometimes there lacks a place or a community in which they all kind of get together and that this place has these people that are thinking in this way, kind of in this positive and let's get together and do something kind of way. I think it's something that people fear in general when moving to a new place, whether they will find the people that they connect with, the people that they can grow with.
I was lucky in this way. However, there is also the risk with social bubbles that you consider them to be the mainstream. And one shouldn't forget that, I guess, the Bulgarian mainstream is quite different than this group of friends that I introduced you to yesterday. So I like looking into data. I like statistical data. And various studies show that, for instance, education in Bulgaria is poor. There is no other way to phrase this. We are living in times of educational failure in Bulgaria that affects huge portions of the population. if not the majority. For instance, there is this famous PISA study of the OECD that shows that roughly half of Bulgarian high school students are functionally illiterate. When you're living abroad, you would read about these data points. You would say to yourself, "Oh, quite that this is quite scary," but you wouldn't realize what it means. When you live here, when you try to interact with people outside of your bubble, you would end up having a conversation with someone who does show these signs of literal illiteracy. So one must keep in mind that although you have great friends who are very smart, well-educated, have great jobs, etc., other people might be very different than this image.
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, speaking of data and statistics, you are also the creator of a really, really eye-opening and interesting online platform and social media account called Zemlevesh, right? Zemlevesh.
Yes. Perfect pronunciation.
Yes, I practiced it. What does Zemlevesh mean, actually?
Well, it means someone knowing Earth or knowing the world. So the purpose of the platform is to present Bulgaria and the world around us in an accessible way with data from trustworthy sources. So what I do is I make some simple charts based on these data. And I would usually post them online on social media where most people could see them. They could start some discussions. They could get inspired to read more into some particular topics. And this is something I've been doing for the last couple of years. I think I started in 2019.
Yeah.
It had, some more intense periods and some periods where I wouldn't do much. But I still kept it as a hobby. And in Bulgaria, it helped me meet other very interesting people from different organizations, from media, NGOs, etc.
Yeah.
I think this has been my biggest and most important reward in doing this.
Yeah, it is.
And it has helped me integrate into local society as well. On the one hand, it gave me knowledge, or at least statistical knowledge of what the Bulgaria I knew looked like today. And it also helped me, meet new people more easily because some of them might have heard of this platform.
Yeah.
And it was a useful conversation starter.
Yeah, it's a really, for me, very useful account and way to get information. I encourage our audience to also go and look at it as well, because it's, for me, very helpful. Even like when I know you have stuff about the elections in Bulgaria, the elections in Europe, I also saw that you had graphics, data visualizations of like different statistics going on. And for me, at least, it's very helpful to be able to look, as a visual learner, to be able to look at what's happening in a little more simpler terms than what they're talking about on the news and media.
Indeed, and unfortunately, there is little coverage, not only in Bulgaria, but around the world in general, of data-based news. So obviously, a lot of the news we see would be purely qualitative. It would be fairly subjective. Even if it comes from a trustworthy, notable news outlet. And I do like data. I think that numbers, they allow us to look at things in a much more objective way.
Yeah.
Obviously, numbers can lie too. Numbers can be manipulated, but if you pick a trustworthy source, and if you critically assess its trustworthiness, you have the chance to look at things objectively. Unfortunately,
to really look at the facts and what...
And also to look at comparable facts. So it's hard to compare adjectives. It's very easy to compare numbers. 2 would always be bigger than 1, for instance. And there are no 2 opinions or 3 opinions about this. And the issue is that numbers simply aren't sexy. So if you want to look at data, you might end up at the website of the National Statistics Institute, where you would, after some difficult browsing, you would look at big tables full of numbers. And this isn't something a regular person would do in their spare time. And a person without the necessary background in mathematics, I guess, would find it more difficult to understand what these data mean.
Yeah.
Especially speaking of functional illiteracy, most people wouldn't really get what's behind these numbers. So what I try to do is to make them simple, to make them social media friendly, and to transform them in a way where a person without some extreme educational background can understand them in a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Because this is unfortunately the attention span of most young people today. Even, I guess, our attention span isn't much longer on social media. And it has been fairly successful and inspiring. I've been especially happy to learn in my conversations, in my correspondence with online fans, that they found something particularly inspiring, that they've read further into different topics that I've presented. And I like to stress the following thing. I don't think that social media should be educational. I don't consider my account, my platform, to be educational. I prefer to look at it as inspiring. So you shouldn't use social media for education. It's the wrong place to educate yourself.
It's true.
Please don't do it. However, it is a good source of inspiration. You can learn more about a topic. You can get the necessary inspiration to read more into a topic afterwards. To check it online, to read a book about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that Zemlevesh serves as this spark, for people online.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't want to see it as a single educational source of all of their knowledge.
I can say that, like, I've been following you actually there for quite a while. And that's actually how we found you. Because we're like, oh, this person's so cool, creating these visual data visualizations.
We should supporter.
See who's behind this and what they're up to. But yeah, for me, it's like, as you said, a spark of interest after like being able to visualize the graphs. Even like after events happen, you're very good at keeping up with events, which I want to compliment you on.
As I mentioned in regards to my to my university degree, I am quite efficient.
Yes, and so like usually what happens is an event happens and I'm like, wow, this is cool, but right now I'm not going to look into it. I see one of your data visualization and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is interesting. I should actually learn more about this and what's actually happening. And then I look up more.
I often get the question how I pick my topics, and I must say I don't have an agenda, so I don't have a list taped to my refrigerator saying, okay, 2 posts per month about healthcare, 3 posts about politics, and so on.
Okay.
I usually make charts about topics that interest me on that particular day.
Yeah.
Of course, they're often related to something that's been trendy in the news, because I would read more about it online on those days, and eventually I would end up making something or like visualizing something about it.
Yeah.
However, it's often topics that are not trendy in the news, but topics that I find personally very important. So often the news news outlets would focus on topics that are fairly irrelevant to most people. For instance, if you follow Bulgarian news, you would see that almost daily there is some news about car crashes.
Yeah.
Tragedies, of course, no question about that. But structurally unimportant ones. However, you have various other topics. If you start with education, go through demographics, etc., that remain mostly hidden from mainstream media, or at least they're not presented daily, although some other topics are at the level of a structural crisis. And what I like to do with Zemlevesh online is to attract more attention to these hidden topics. Sometimes one would go into conspiracy theories and claim that media show you, well, unimportant, trendy news to distract you from what's really vital. Sometimes this might be true, hard to say. But even if it's not the case, even if we're not living in the middle of some huge conspiracy, it's sad that mainstream media usually shows you what sells better. Personalized stories, while structural issues are the ones that really matter, the ones that should be shown to a national audience.
That's true. It's cool that you're actually able to kind of keep up, and I really love the mission that you have behind it to kind of make this data more accessible for people, you know, to spark an interest in people. But obviously, this is your hobby right now.
Yes. And I like it. I like it that way. I think that this gives me two main advantages. First of all, I think it makes the whole project more trustworthy. So if someone was thinking that I get paid to transmit certain messages,
there's no back agenda.
Yeah, exactly. Understandably, people would be questioning my motives. So there is the good part. People usually know that I'm not paid to do it and trust me more because of this. And the second part is that I can do it in my own free time the way I like to. Yeah. So in a certain week, I might completely skip working on this personal project. In other weeks, I might invest lots of time in it.
Yeah.
And I can choose my own pace. I can choose my own hours.
Yeah.
And this keeps the spark alive.
Yeah. That's, for me, inspiring to be able to like keep up a hobby and kind of do it when you're, I guess.
Otherwise, it becomes a job.
Motivation comes.
And no job is inspiring in 100% of the time.
That's true. But okay, so besides this hobby, what are you doing now in Bulgaria?
I currently manage Manja Online. It's, I hope, a fairly famous Bulgarian retail company that specializes in sustainable fashion. What this means is we sell secondhand and outlet clothes. It is a Bulgarian company. It's even based in Varna, which I find
really cool.
Really cool indeed. And I've been lucky to find this new professional home here in Bulgaria. I work with some great professionals there as well. I've learned a lot about the industry, the fashion industry, sustainability, ecology, textile production in the process. And I'm very satisfied that I can work in a company with which I share this personal mission or this personal passion about sustainability. It's not something I would constantly mention in private conversations, that I care about sustainability, I care about nature and the world around us. But I do, and I think it's important to make sure that we leave Earth as a planet, as a home, livable, habitable for the next generations. And this is in fact our mission. Currently, textile production and generally the fashion industry is responsible for, well,
fast fashion is responsible for
bad
most
things.
of the
I wouldn't say most of the problems. So obviously you have the energy industry, you have transportation, etc. But the fashion industry is responsible for a sizable share of the environmental pollution we see around the world. And you have two solutions to this problem, and I guess they go hand in hand as well. First of all, buy less stuff. Nobody needs a new T-shirt every day or every week or probably even every month. So buy less stuff. And second, you could, well, buy perfectly good secondhand clothes. I like to say that every piece of clothing we wear becomes used the moment we put it on. So obviously we wear secondhand clothes right now because we've worn them before, I guess. And
my whole outfit is secondhand.
Oh, congratulations. I wear, I'm not sure if, I think this shirt is actually secondhand too. I bought it recently. Anyway, so it is a powerful message. It is also something very important to me personally to work in this field, and I'm happy that I do. I'm happy that my job includes
this passion.
spreading this message and standing behind this passion.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's nice to be able to work in something that you actually believe the mission of. Getting a job in Bulgaria can sometimes be hit or miss. You either really love the company or it's not so great. Or after time it becomes not so great. So it's good to hear that you've been able to find...
well, mine is great, but again, I want to stress I am lucky to have this environment because it's, For others, it might be harder to find a similarly satisfying job. And I mean, it might be harder in Varna in particular. So I already mentioned there are enormous differences between the, let's call it the labor market in the capital, in Sofia, where many people move, and Varna, for instance. So what is quite common in Bulgaria is that you have, at least as jobs for young professionals, a few international companies, perhaps some Bulgarian ones, that have their, well, it's not exactly headquarters, but their local main offices in Sofia, where most of the higher paying jobs and higher positions are concentrated.
Yeah.
Then sometimes they would have offices in Varna as well, but obviously the higher paying jobs and higher positions won't be in this side office here. So people are left with fewer choices where to work, and
Especially if they want to work in person. Anyways,
so
in English.
if you have people in Varna, especially such who want to work in person and who are ambitious enough to aim at a higher position in the company, their goals might be impossible to achieve in Varna. This has been an issue with friends whom I have observed here. Many find some workarounds. So they either work remotely, or they work for a completely foreign company, or they start their own businesses, or there are also a couple of industries here that are especially lucrative. So of course you can work in IT, you can work as a ship captain or a mechanic, a ship engineer. This is, well, quite the opportunity in Varna. Those are like well-respected, high-paying jobs related to the sea. However, it's definitely harder for young professionals in Varna to find a good jobs and to achieve their goals as fast as in other places. Sometimes you might have to wait longer. Sometimes you might have to, well, compromise with some of your goals. And nevertheless, I was lucky enough to land at a company that is not only Bulgarian, but Varna-based. So obviously you don't have this problem with all of the cool jobs concentrated in Sofia or even abroad. They are in fact here. And I'm very happy about this. I think that Varna needs and deserves and must have more local businesses that have their top jobs concentrated here. There are a few examples, unfortunately too few, but I hope this is changing. I've come to learn about a few international companies that have recently opened their local headquarters in Varna, not in Sofia. I guess
really
they're
exciting.
attracted. Yeah, that's exciting. And some of them are fairly big as employers. I guess they're attracted by somewhat lower wages than in the capital, which is a big decision factor. It's perhaps easier to find talent. It's easier to rent an office, etc. And I hope this development continues and that it proves good for the local economy.
I would say that Varna is actually quite a cosmopolitan, metropolitan. I would say that I'm talking about Burgas. Burgas isn't as a feeling of a city as much as Varna is.
The difference is that you have a couple of fairly big universities in Varna. So you have the medical university, the economic one, the marine university, the technical one. You also have a couple of private universities in or around the city. And this attracts quite a few students, young professionals that, well, eventually some of them choose to remain in the city. It also attracts quite a few foreigners. So this is unique for Varna and for only a couple of other cities in Bulgaria. And, well, obviously Burgas has a much smaller student population. And you can feel this in the evenings on the streets.
Now that we're coming towards the end of our podcast, something that I'd like to ask you is, in the upcoming 5 years, what is something that you hope or would like to see develop or change or happen in Bulgaria and in the Bulgarian society and also in your own life here or abroad?
Well, the gods laugh when mortals make plans. So it doesn't make much sense to reveal or even make my own plans. I'll just let things happen as they unfold. However, I do have hopes in general for Bulgaria, for my home city, and for society as a whole. For Varna, my biggest hope is that we get a real street to my parents' house.
That'd be good.
Yeah, it's something I tend to joke about. Unfortunately, it is no joke. Varna does have some grave infrastructure issues, and well, not only infrastructure, but others as well. They are related to the local government, corruption, the way the city is run in general. I hope these things improve.
Yeah.
In Bulgaria as a whole, or in society, I would like to see more civic engagement. I would like to see people caring more about what's happening in the country. And unfortunately, I must recognize that this goes through rigorous education, rigorous information campaigns, things that currently aren't available, and things that currently aren't happening. My biggest hope is that the state reforms in a way that that it starts to provide this better quality education, better quality information, etc., and that it makes people more interested in what's happening. If it doesn't, which is unfortunately a real possibility, I hope that there are enough people outside the government sector that can take its place, that can provide this education, this information on a sufficient scale to reach a tipping point where enough people care enough in a sufficiently informed way to demand change, and to demand positive change, most of all, because things can, well, I'm far from saying that things are in their worst possible way right now. Of course, Bulgaria offers many opportunities. Bulgaria does have some advantages it can offer to young people, to all sorts of people, either coming from abroad or staying and living here. However, things can go worse as well. So I hope they change for the better, and I hope that this change is driven from, well, what's the word for a grassroots movements, like from the ground up, from the bottom up?
Yeah, from the ground up.
Yeah. So I do hope that this change is driven from the ground up, because then it would stick, or at least it has a higher chance of sticking long enough to produce a higher standard of living and better opportunities for people deciding and choosing to live and develop here.
I would say that from my observations and things that I've heard from people, it is happening more and more. There is this hope that, if the government's not going to do it, we're going to take it into our own hands to get informed, to create informational campaigns that really, you're also doing your part, I would say, in this, in creating.
But I'm not succeeding, unfortunately.
You have quite a big reach, I would say.
Not big enough. But what I mean is that there are two aspects of making things better. So one can make things better for themselves. And I think this is already happening. If I look at my friends, at my social bubble here, these are people who are doing incredibly well. They have a sufficient income to sustain an enjoyable lifestyle. They have more than enough friends to have enjoyable talks, to have great conversations, exchange ideas, start businesses, etc. So for a single individual, things can go well. However, to change things on a grander scale, you need a consensus, and you need a majority of people seeing things in a similar way. And unfortunately, this is not the case yet. Of course, there are things happening in this direction. There are initiatives. My personal impression is that these initiatives are not successful in the way that can make this difference I'm talking about. They can become successful. I hope they do, and I believe they're on the right track. But we're very far from this point. But please, this only means to serve as a motivator to try harder and to do these things in a bigger scale, with more vigor and with more motivation.
Yeah, I'd say that there's baby steps that are happening, but they're consistent and they're creating results, little by little results, but there is progress and there is little by little change.
It's baby steps, and I hope we scale up the steps now.
Yes, hopefully. That is indeed the inspiration.
True.
Well, thank you, Ivan, for sharing your story with us, for telling us about your experience growing up here, going abroad, working abroad, and then coming back to Bulgaria, and also how you made the decisions in between. That's really, for me, inspiring and also eye-opening.
I must
I
say,
think
a lot of the decisions you ascribe to me as a subject, as an agent of these decisions, are overrated. What I've come to observe in my life is that things usually happen outside of my planning. Mm-hmm. So I would plan and dream about certain things, certain stuff, and then something else would happen. Mm. It wasn't necessarily worse, it wasn't necessarily inferior to what I was planning, it was just different.
Yeah.
And sooner or later I realized I'm fairly satisfied with what's happening in my life. I came to learn that what is most important, or at least what was most important to me, was seizing opportunities when they appeared.
Yeah.
Adapting, adjusting one's mindset as one learns new things, meets new people, etc. And generally being open to new opportunities and new possibilities.
Yeah.
So this became something like my motto growing up, and I still live by this credo. I think it's what makes the difference between successful and less successful people, seizing opportunities as they arrive, regardless of your plans. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you might plan for something all of your life, and then end up being disappointed because it didn't happen while you had the chance for other great things to happen to you.
Yeah.
And such great things can happen to you in Bulgaria as well. And I'm happy that such things happened to me, even though perhaps they weren't a plan I had in mind a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to answer what will happen to me a couple of years later.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the gods have something great in store for me.
Yeah. It's great to have this mindset and way of thinking that as opportunities come, you should grab them and see where they take you, instead of creating this big plan that might not necessarily pan out the way that you think it will.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's good to have this open mindset, so that even bigger and better things can happen than what you think of.
Good things can happen even if you didn't plan for them.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's a good thing to end up the podcast on. Thank you,
on
Ivan,
this positive note.
Again. Yes.
Thank you too.
I think that our audience, I hope that our audience found this conversation really inspiring. I definitely did. And thank you for saying yes to this opportunity to share your story.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure to have you
Same.
on our podcast. To our audience, I want to thank you for tuning in and watching or listening our podcast and our conversations today with Ivan. I hope you found it inspiring and that it opened your eyes and your perspective to even more interesting opportunities and possibilities that could be available in Bulgaria, in life here. Please make sure to go and subscribe to our podcast so that you can receive a notification every time that we have a new episode, and share this with people that you think would also find our conversation and Ivan's story interesting. Thank you for tuning in, and go out and do something awesome today. Bye-bye.